So who do we have here? We got James the astrophotographer, Cameron Gillis, Book Davies, Aaron Thompson, Mike Wiesner, Cloudy, Windy Monday in Arizona. But hi, everybody. Aaron Thompson. I think I mentioned Cameron Gillis, but if not, I'll mention him again. Bergman Scooter. Says great day today. Book Davies says, Keys, we're back. Norm Hughes, Beatrice Hines, hello. David Samard, Eduardo Simone, and I think that's it for right now. But thanks for watching, everybody. This program, although I'm live right now, this program with Dr. Barth was pre-recorded because he's getting some dental work done. So could not do it. So we recorded it yesterday. But anyways, I'll be chatting with you live. Hello, everybody. It's Scott Roberts with Explore Scientific, and this is Dr. Daniel Barth's 7th program on How Do You Know? If you don't know, Daniel Barth is a STEM educator. In fact, heads up all of STEM for the University of Arkansas, based out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. He and I knew each other from many years ago when he was working in a telescope shop called Scope City. And so one of the things that he wanted to touch on was some of the common questions and answers that he would give for people selecting eyepieces, and what telescope, how do telescopes work, and so he would one of the things you have to do if you're going to get people outfitted for the gear that they need to explore the night sky is, especially if they're going to do that visually, is getting them into a nice set of eyepieces that's going to really let them enjoy the experience. And so, anyways, it's nice to see all of you. I hope you had a great weekend. It's beautiful weather now in Arkansas. It's actually quite warm. We've had some clear nights, had a beautiful full moon last night. That was nice to watch. This week, starting tomorrow, of course, we'll have the Global Star Party. It's our 43rd one, and so that's something I wanted to point out. It'll start at 8 o'clock Central. I also wanted to remind all of you to go on to explorescientific.com/Skies Up and download your free digital copy of Skies Up magazine. We did print out a few copies here, but it's an amazing issue with lots of beautiful illustrations and great articles from astronomers and contributors from all over the world. And when I say all over the world, I mean all over the world. It is a global magazine. It's free, and so Skies Up is a good resource. We do concentrate on the Mars landing. Of course, that was of huge interest by all the people that were there. There's nice commentary from Marcello Souza, who's the senior editor there, and Uh, it was. This is the second issue that we've come out with. It's the first one we've done some printings of. If you guys are really super serious about getting a printing, it's actually kind of expensive to get a printed issue of it. But this is 74 pages of Skies Up, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Well, I guess without further ado, I will switch to Dr. Daniel Barth. He's probably watching right now. As I mentioned, he's getting some dental work done, so could not be here live in person, but he might be in the background checking it all out with his mouth wide open. Anyways, take care, and I will see you on the other side of this recording.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the How Do You Know Show. I'm Dr. Daniel Barth here with our friend and host, Scott Roberts from Explore Scientific, and we're going to take a little bit of a different approach this week. We're going to talk about telescopes and magnification, and this one is particularly for all our astronomy and outreach friends. Some of our teacher pals are going to be interested in this because they teach optics as well, but that's a smaller subset. But for everyone who's ever set up a telescope in a public place, and Scott and I have done this more times than we can count. I do about 50 outreach events a year between stuff with the university, local schools, clubs, and just because I love this stuff. But you get a telescope set up, and somebody will come up to you and go, "Hey, how many power is that thing? That looks
Right.
pretty nice." You've got maybe an 8-inch Dobsonian.
How
Or
powerful is that telescope?
how powerful is that telescope? And of course, the reason for that is the way telescopes were marketed for years. Not so much anymore, but for years and years and years. You would go to a department store around Christmas time and you would see the Christmas telescope display. And they were all 60 millimeter refractors. So, right? So 2¼ inch refractors. And they would show one and they would say, "This is our good telescope." And it's on a simple alt-azimuth mount. And it says, "This one does 120 power." And you go, "Ooh, okay." Then
Ooh.
they show a little bit longer model and they say, "This is our better telescope. This one will do 350 power." And then you see, "This is our best telescope." And it's a very flimsy, spindly equatorial mount, and
Yeah.
it's got slow motion cables coming off of it, and it looks cool. "This will do 800 power."
That'll
And
make
so,
you seem like you're standing on the moon, right?
exactly.
Right.
It's kind of like saying we have three kinds of Ford Pintos, and this one has a speedometer that goes to 70. This one has a speedometer that goes to 120, and this one
Yeah.
has a speedometer that goes to 350 miles an hour.
Dang.
But it's
Okay.
still a Ford Pinto, and at some point, if you know anything at all about optics or telescopes, you're kind of going, "Yeah, okay." And so folks have said, "Well, they couldn't sell it if it wasn't true." Oh my gosh, the faith in the optics and marketing. Of course, Scott, the answer comes to us in how do you calculate the magnification on a telescope? And I suppose that's a good place to start. I
Sure.
have a very lovely telescope here, and I think it's not quite in our view, so I'm going to hold it up. This is a Bresser, and this is a 100 millimeter refractor. It's a 4-inch lens, very nice product, and it's very rugged, and it's got a nice focuser and a carry handle and a dovetail mount and all that. So how do we calculate the magnification? Well, the answer is every telescope has a focal length. So the distance between the objective lens and where the light would come to focus. And this is actually a 102, a Bresser 102. And the focal length here is 600 millimeters, friends. So 60 centimeters. And you figure that's about 2 feet, 30 centimeters to the foot if you like English units. So it's a 600 millimeters from here to where the light would come to a point. Now, if we take a look, and I'm going to set this down, it's kind of a beefy instrument. I love it, but it's a little beefy. We have and the eyepiece that came with it here. I think I can hold this up and folks can see.
Sure.
And this is a nice 20, is it a 26? Yes, it's a 26 millimeter Plassa lens. And we'll talk about what Plassa means in a couple of minutes. But basically, we've got these two numbers. We've got 600 and we've got 26. And essentially, you take the focal length of the telescope and you divide by the focal length of the eyepiece. So basically, 25 millimeters, 4 times is 100, 4 times 6 is 24. And so this 26 millimeter eyepiece gives us 24 power at the eyepiece when you have that in the telescope. And the typical response when you have someone who's buying a new telescope and it comes with this lovely eyepiece,
Right.
only 26 power.
Yeah, that can't quite be enough, right?
That can't be enough. And okay, so get back to the how do they get 600 or 700 power out of a telescope? They have devices called Barley Lenses, and it's a compressor lens for you photographic people out there, and basically it's concave, and it effectively lengthens the focal length. So you can take a 60 millimeter by 700 focal length telescope, and you can go, okay, let's go ahead and put a Barlow in there, and all of a sudden it's 1400 millimeters. And you take 1400 millimeters, and then you put a 3 millimeter eyepiece in there, and 1400 divided by 3, well, that's pretty impressive. That's it's close to 500 power.
Right.
And so this is the episode we call Magnification. Yes, you can. No, you can't. And it comes down to a number of things. But let's go ahead and talk about that eyepiece for a minute.
Okay.
We have some eyepieces here. You saw the little 26 millimeter, and I think this will be instructive. This is a 26 millimeter colossal eyepiece, and getting it angled at the camera here.
Right.
And next to it is a 9
One's got a big lens, and one's got a small lens.
Right, one gives you a very nice large cone of light, and one gives you a very small one, and this is a 9 millimeter. By the time you get down to a 3 millimeter, literally some of these old telescopes, the 3 millimeter eyepiece, the lens aperture you were looking through was tiny, a couple of millimeters, smaller cone of light than a pencil point. It was very tiny. And so when you start getting magnification, and you get greater and greater, shorter and shorter eyepieces, generally to make them at all affordable, you make the eyepiece, the ocular or the lens elements in the eyepiece very, very small. So when you're talking about these eyepieces, we have different designs. This one's a Plossl, and all of these things have odd names. Plossl, and the O has an umlaut on it because it's Iorg Plossl, who was an Austrian fellow in the 1860s who developed this. This lovely design is an Erfel. And Erfel, I don't know if he was Dutch or German, I really don't know. Another fellow in the 1850s. And then we have a couple of very nice, say, gee, well, when I get high magnification, and these eyepieces, I tend to get very small apertures to look through, and I get a very narrow field of view. And so people always used to say, well, it's a trade-off. You can't have a nice wide field and high magnification. On the other hand, here's a lovely piece of glass. This is an Explorer Scientific 82-degree field eyepiece, and this is a monster. This is a couple of pounds of glass, and you can see this is a much bigger format than our 1.25 inches. And this is a 2-inch format, so it's a very nice big eyepiece. And yes, it has a lovely big aperture to look through, and obviously a lot more glass in this, and more elements. The old designs, the Erfels and the Seren Ramstens, were 2-element eyepieces. The Erfels, I believe, are a 3. The Plossls are a 4. Some of these big modern designs are 7, even 9, and more elements. Do you know offhand, Scott, how many elements in this? I don't.
Right off the top of my head, I would say that from memory, it's 9.
9 sounds about right. And so you're talking about the difference between shaping 2 pieces of glass precisely in a fairly small size, as opposed to doing 9 elements in a very large format. And so can you get away from trade-offs? You can, but you need to keep in mind, friends, that in all cases, it's the eyepiece that does the magnifying, and it's not the telescope. When someone says how many powers that telescope, what they're really saying is that they're not very familiar with telescopes and how they work. A telescope itself doesn't magnify anything. The telescope's job, in fact, is to gather light. And if you can think about, people often use this analogy, they talk about big telescopes as light buckets. You can think about this. If you take a bucket and you say, oh, it's going to rain tonight. I need some rainwater for a washing or for watering my plants. And so you go set your 5-gallon plastic bucket out in your yard. And if it rains 2 inches, you'll have 2 inches of rain in that bucket. Well, if you set out a small little, shot glass, you'll also get 2 inches of rain. But the volume of water collected in the large bucket is far greater than in the small glass. So the amount of light you're going to get at your eye is dependent upon the aperture, the size of your telescope. So your telescope doesn't magnify anything, it simply collects light. Why do we want a larger telescope? And aperture fever is real. Many of our friends watching will go, oh yeah, I started out with a 6-inch job and now I have this 24-inch thing that I need a ladder to climb on to look at the eyepiece.
Right.
And why? Well, the more light you get into the telescope, the brighter the image will be. And for every telescope, there are those things that are just a little bit too faint to see. And we talk about the magnitude of stars, and the higher the number you get, the fainter it is. Good pair of binoculars will get you down to about magnitude 9 under very nice skies. 7 by 50 or 10 by 50. You get a 6-inch, like a Dobsonian, or if you're very lucky, a 6-inch refractor. That bad boy will get you down to about magnitude 11. To see Pluto, which is about magnitude 15 right now, you need about a 16-inch telescope in order to get that, and each magnitude is a logarithmic scale. So just going a couple more magnitudes involves a lot more glass, whether that be a mirror or a lens. And so the telescope aperture gathers light. It also, the larger telescope, because it can see fainter things, effectively can probe farther out into the universe. You can see things that are farther away and fainter.
Right.
The other thing that most people don't understand, they understand the idea intuitively, oh, bigger telescope, more light, fainter object, farther away, I increase what I refer to as my light grasp. Yes, but the aperture also controls resolution. Right. The other, somewhat, I won't say it's a silly question.
That's in detail. That's what they want,
right.
Really.
Detail. Right. And you've got it too, Scott. You have an impressive telescope, and someone comes up, only half joking. Can you see the flag on the moon with that? Have you had that question many times?
Many times.
I have.
Yeah.
And you try to explain, no, that's a 3 by 5 foot object, and it's, even if it's flat on the ground.
I've had people claim to have done it. Okay, they called it space trash or moon trash, and you're like, wow. Okay, this is.
No, I calculated it out one time just because I was tired of the question. So we did it as a problem in an astronomy class. You need a mirror about 1/4 mile in diameter, and it would have to be in orbit because nothing that size could support itself on the ground. I suppose you could have an array of mirrors, like the Very Large Telescope has an array of mirrors.
Right.
But you would need something ridiculous, like.
Might be cheaper just to fly a spacecraft out there.
It would literally be far cheaper to fly to
Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which did take pictures of the the
right. It would be far cheaper to build a reconnaissance orbiter or hire Elon Musk and fly you there with your Nikon and take
right. That and you're in there.
But the whole thing is that yes, if you want to see more detail, a larger aperture will give you the resolution. So the telescope gives you brightness and resolution. The eyepiece gives you magnification, and you think, oh, so as long as I can stack Barley lenses and things, then I'm good. But in fact, there's always trade-offs. And if we think about magnification, one of the most productive ways to think about magnification, although this is harder for young people today than it used to be, think about a film projector or a slide projector. Scott, when we were in school, you had film strips, right? With a little.
That's right. Yep.
Or
I
your
was the
parents may
first
have
film
had,
operator, so.
right, the
Yeah.
AP kid, club kid,
Yes.
the operator, right? Your parents may have had slides, color slides from a vacation, and
Yes.
they had the old Bausch and Lomb carousel projector.
Yeah.
But think about a film projector, friends. So we've got a piece of film. The film has only so much information on it. In a weird way, a telescope also collects information. That's what we call resolution. How fine a detail can you see? Picture a photograph of someone taken. The president goes to make a speech, and he stands and he waves to the crowd, and hi there, everybody, and you get this shot where you can see he's wearing a wristwatch. Okay, well, if we magnify that photo, can we see who made the wristwatch? Can we see Timex or Rolex? Or can we see what time it is? Can we see the second hand? Can we see the number 12 at the top? At some point you realize, gee, that information just isn't in this photo. It's not in this piece of film. That's what resolution is. The more resolution we have, the more information is there, and modern cell phones are astounding. Modern cameras are astounding. You can take a photo and blow these things up. You can take a photo with a good Canon, Nikon, Sony SLR camera, and you can blow this thing up and make a picture 4, 5, 6 feet across, and it looks fine. It looks great. However, at some point, this breaks down. There's no more information to be had. Back to our projector analogy. We've got our piece of film that has only so much information. You can see the president is a picture of, oh, I don't know, it's a picture of Richard Nixon. I'm not a crook. And he's wearing a wristwatch, and you're looking at this photo. Okay, well, you could magnify it as much as you want to, but you're not going to get as much detail as you want.
Right.
I had someone who was very disappointed to learn this fact in a very hard way. When I was selling telescopes, he came into the store and says, I hear you sell microscopes. Yes, we do. Can I use your microscope to magnify something? And we're like, ooh, nothing gooey or slimy. He says, no, I have a photo, and I want to look at the negative. We're like, okay, it's Bruder film, cool, let's go. And it's this picture of a desert scene looking out the window of a car, and there's like a droplet of water that's reflecting the sun. He says it's a UFO. And I'm hoping to see windows or landing gear. And of course,
Aliens
waving in the window. He was disappointed. He said, it's just not there. I thought with a microscope I could see windows or landing gear or something.
Yeah.
And it was an old Kodachrome picture from the 1960s, and so of course the information wasn't there. I said, look at the edge of the window. He said, oh, it's kind of grainy. I said, yeah, there's a limitation to how much information is in the film. He didn't quite get it, but I'm sure our audience does. The amount of information, going back to our analogy with the film projector, that's what the aperture of the telescope gives you. The projector system is what the eyepiece does for you. If you think about a telescope and you're pointing at Saturn or the moon, and you're pointing at the moon and you're looking at a lovely crater like Ptolemais, and you're going, ooh, there's a mountain in the middle, and I want to see the shadow, and I want to see the contour of the mountain. You get this on your telescope, there's only so much information there. You can start stacking eyepieces, but at some point, you run out of information. With our film projector analogy, there's only so much detail on the screen, right? Think of a freeze frame from a movie. There's only so much detail there. Could you take a projector and put it on a bigger screen? Or if you like, take your DVD and put it on a more gigantic television monitor. Yes, you can, but whether it's a 32-inch, I bought it cheapy, no-name monitor at Walmart on sale for Black Friday for $100, or whether it's a 25,000 85-inch, a Mesotron monitor. You know what? The amount of information on the DVD doesn't change just because you plugged in a better television set.
Right.
The same way here, the amount of information coming out of the projector doesn't change. If you think about pointing it at Saturn, when the telescope comes to focus at a point, a dot of light. That's why we don't look at the sun, kids, because the telescope focuses the information on a very small place. That would blind you. Don't do that. Don't point objects at the sun. Well, when we have our image of Saturn and it's in a pinpoint, what the eyepiece does, like the projector, it blows that up so we can see it, but there's only so much light. If we took our projector and we're showing an image on a screen, say 6 feet away, and it's a fairly small image and it's very bright, and we say, yeah, it's cool, it's bright, it's sharp, but it's not big enough. Remember in the old days, we would back the projector up so it filled the screen in the front of the classroom.
Right.
If you keep backing the projector up, the image will keep getting larger. And you're like, well, that's great. But we're not changing the amount of light coming out of the projector.
And it's dimmer. It looks
dimmer. It becomes more faint.
Yeah.
And eventually, we can pull that projector back far enough where the image is so faint, we can't detect it anymore.
And the details don't look sharp anymore.
They do not. They do not. We're running into two problems, Scott, and you've nailed them exactly. The resolution limit, how much information is there? And two, the brightness limit, how much information is there?
Right.
And so when we think about a telescope, and again, we're talking a relatively, a refractor or a telescope the size of this dresser here, 100 millimeters or less, okay? A small, modest telescope like a lot of people start with. There's essentially two limits. The first limit is the resolution limit, and that occurs at about 2 times the aperture in millimeters. So at 2 times the aperture, you've got a 60 millimeter telescope. That means at 120 power, you've run out of resolution. Yes, you can magnify it more, but you're not going to see more features on the rings of Saturn or the craters of the moon. You're not going to see more detail in the Andromeda galaxy. At 2 times the aperture, you've run out of resolution. And at about 3 times the aperture in millimeters, you've run into the brightness limit where you can no longer see anything. And for a small telescope, let's say, again, our 100 millimeter refractor like we have here on the table, you're looking at 200 power is about the resolution limit, and about 300 power is the brightness limit. Now, people will point out, and I can see people wave, but wait, the moon is really bright, Jupiter's really bright. Yes, with very bright objects, you can continue to pump the magnification, but you can't get around the resolution limit. So at some point, and I suppose there are other people who are going to say, but I have an Amazatron telescope. Scott, you know my instrument, my personal instrument is an Apimax.
Yeah.
And it's a very rare piece. And some people have, oh my gosh, Explorer makes these really outstanding triplet refractors, which are just astounding. I use a 127 triplet at work in my astronomy classes. It's just astounding. But nevertheless, no matter how good the glass is, the aperture limits resolution.
That's true.
And it limits the amount of light you can get. And yes, if you point at something very bright, I could take my Explorer 127, I could take my Apimax, which is a 133 millimeter, it's a 5 1/4 inch. I could point at the moon, and I could stack Barley lenses, and I could go to 1200 power. But when we're talking objects out in space, star clusters, nebula, the brightness limit really starts to matter. How many stars can you see in the field of view? The brightness, what we call the light grasp, the brightness limit really starts to matter. And so this whole topic of magnification is not as simple as it seems. The other thing that we run into with telescopes is we're sitting at the bottom of an ocean of air. Our ocean of air is 60 miles thick. 95% of it is in the first 6 to 8 miles, right? The 10-kilometer limit, you can't breathe anymore. And water will boil in a paper cup held in your hand because the air pressure is so low. But nevertheless, we're looking through, at least, even in the best, clearest places, we're looking through 10 miles of air. Air is problematic because air suspends aerosols. Out in the desert, the low desert, you and I met out in California, and I know you've been to many a star party out in the desert. But the desert air suspends, it does, it's very clear as far as clouds, but it suspends dust like crazy.
Yes, it does.
And so you've got these, you've got this huge load of fine dust suspended in the upper atmosphere. And you can't see it to look through it. But nevertheless, if you're anywhere near a city, that dust reflects light back down and causes what we call sky glow. There's oh, and I'm blanking on a name right now. Is it the Bessler scale? I'm thinking not. I'm thinking I'm messing it up. There's a scale for sky glow.
The Bortle scale?
Bortle scale. Thank you
Yes.
very much. The Bortle scale. Very good. And it goes from 0 to 9. And 9 is like New York City and Times Square, where you can see the moon, but that's not it. Where I'm at out in the Ozarks, I have a Bortle scale of 2 to 3 because I have ridges around me that block the light from nearby. The nearest town is about 15 miles away, and my little local village, there's a ridge between me and them, so I get some very clear skies. So there's sky glow, and sky glow, because it brightens the background, if you've got something that is very dim, you're looking at something very dim, and there's light coming at you. If you hold a candle in front of a car headlight and stand 20 feet away, you're gonna have a really hard time telling whether or not the candle's lit. Because the candlelight is just being overwhelmed by the background light. It's much the same here. Light pollution is a problem. The other problem, of course, is what we call turbulence, or as astronomers call it, good seeing.
Yes.
The air is an ocean. It's in motion. Hello, wind, breezes, and sometimes we notice this if we're very observant, we're outside, we notice, oh, the wind is out of the south, but oh look, the clouds are coming from the west and moving east, and you're like, well, if the wind's blowing from the south, how are the clouds going this perpendicular direction? There's different winds at different atmospheric levels at different altitudes above the ground. And of course, at the interface, where one is going one way and one is going the other, you get turbulence.
Right.
This is very much...
There was an astronomer called Pickering, and he created a Pickering scale, and Pickering scale at 1 was like the worst seeing, where stars like completely obliterated, swimming in the eyepiece, and as it gets better and better, perfect would be a 10. Okay, so if you had Bortle 1 skies with a Pickering scale of 10, that would be a perfect night.
Perfect night.
Perfect night. No light pollution.
Don't hold your breath, kids.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, this swimming, the other thing people don't realize is that the turbulence in the air, it causes eddies, and these have a certain size. And if you have a smaller telescope, you're actually looking through the bubble. If you have a large aperture telescope, you tend to see the bubble, if that makes sense. If you think about a soap bubble floating in the air, if you put your eye really close to it, don't do that, it pops, it hurts, ask me how I know. But if you blow a bubble and you're like, ooh, and you're staring through it, you don't see the bubble because you're looking through the whole thing. But if you pull back, you see the bubble wobbles and shimmers and all sorts of other things. So
Yes.
Oftentimes when we're looking at, we want more magnification, we want it all, right? We all want it all. We want a big 16-inch daub with a mirror the size of a large pizza, and
Yes.
we want to be Captain Galaxy and see things far, far away, many microparsecs out. And yet, the turbulence in the air bothers us more with the big telescope than it does with the small one. Many astronomers use what's called an aperture mask. They'll take a cardboard plug the size of the scope, and they'll just have a little hole. So they're stopping down 16 inches down to say 4 inches. And now you've got basically a 4-inch long focal ratio telescope instead of a 16-inch short focal range telescope. So you can change a 16-inch f4 to a 4-inch f16 with the use of a cardboard aperture mask.
Right.
And that will eliminate a lot of problems with seeing. And when we talk about seeing, Scott, those of you who aren't familiar, if you've ever looked over a barbecue grill and seen the shimmer coming up, if you looked across a hot parking lot on a summer day and seen the air shimmering, At night, many times, you can see if there's a building with a flat black tar roof, and you see the heat shimmer coming up off of that as the heat rises. This is simply that air turbulence in action. This is why we don't want to point our telescope and look over a rooftop if we can avoid it. We don't want to take a telescope and look, set it up in a parking lot, which, hello, outreach people, we do that all the time, okay? But if
Yes,
we're
we
going to be
do.
serious
Three quarters
about our
parking lots. That's right. It's not always
the parking lot outside of the Explore Scientific Store,
right.
which is lovely black asphalt with all kinds of security lights, parking lot lights around it.
Yes.
And it's like, oh my gosh, this is an awful environment to look at very nice glass. So we have this, we have these problems with both sky glow and turbulence and magnification and resolution. So as we start to test our telescope, and people say, but what power is it? How many power can this telescope go to? It's much, I suppose, like driving a sports car. And you say, well, how fast can it go? Well, I suppose that depends on, do you have good fuel? Is it a straight road? Is it a wide road? Is it narrow? Is it winding through the mountaintops? Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is the pavement dry? Are your tires okay? There's a lot of things that go into magnification. But the four primary ones that we need to look at are the aperture of the telescope, because a telescope and an eyepiece fundamentally works with light. The size of your aperture gathers the light with which we work. So the bigger the telescope we have, the more light we can gather, the more things we can do with it. The second is that, remember friends, it's the eyepiece that does your magnifying, and many people will invest more money in eyepieces than they did in the telescope to begin with.
Right.
And it's not unusual to see someone who has, say, a nice Meade or Celestron 8-inch SCT, one of the most popular telescopes in the world, and they probably paid somewhere between $12 and $100 and $2,000 for it. And then they open up their box and they've got $3,000 worth of eyepieces and Barley lenses and filters and accessories in a little box. It's not uncommon at all. People who start with a telescope, I want to start out in astronomy. I got $250 to spend. So you go, okay, here's a nice small telescope. And then they call you back a month later. You know, it only came with one eyepiece. How do I get more power? Open up your wallets, friends, and let me tell you about eyepieces. And you know, you've got 3, 4, 5, 7, 9 element eyepieces and more. And so you go, okay, well, you spent $250. Here's these pretty good eyepieces at about $50, $60 a piece, and you want at least 2 more and a Barlow lens. And so, okay, you spent $250 on your telescope. Let's drop another $400 on eyepieces and a Barlow lens. What do you want? A filter set? You know, okay, let's get you a nice 5 filter set for about $100. And you quickly realize that, like so many hobbies, the basic equipment, the camera body, is your first investment, and it's the little one. Hello, photography, and any other hobby you can think of. Astronomy, skiing, skeet shooting. Why do they call it
Fishing?
Fishing, yes. Why do they call it rod? What are you throw money into?
But that's not going to be enough, is it? So.
No, it's not. So the telescope is your first investment, and you should get as nice an instrument as you can afford. You also have to think about who's going to use this. Do we want to take it with us, or do we want to put it in a permanent place? My big refractor is 7 feet long, and it weighs 45 pounds. The whole telescope with the mount and the counterweights and everything, it's 350 pounds of equipment before you add a single eyepiece. So, portable? I've done it.
Transportable.
You know,
Transportable.
yeah, it's and right now it's I call it a 3-man scope, because I like to have 3 people there to help me set it up.
Sure.
No one should hurt their back. And I've had this happen before. I have had people come in when I was selling telescopes. I want the big one. I want the 12-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. Really, are you sure? It's a 65-pound weight you're putting on a 4-foot stand, and then you have to hold it and reach underneath. And yeah, the guy came back 2 months later, can I get this repaired or should I sell it? And the focuser, which sticks out the back, the focuser was bent at about a 40-degree angle. Well, what happened? I'm out in the desert, I'm putting it up, I'm by myself, and I stepped back to reach for the securing bolt, and a rock turned under my foot, and the telescope fell on me and broke my ankle.
Oh,
And I was able to drag it into the car, and fortunately it was the left ankle, so I could drive back to town. But it was a bad day. I'm like, okay. So we have to think about, and that's why so many people like instruments like this nice 4-inch refractor, because it's a beautiful instrument, and yes, you can see 10,000 different things in the sky with it. People sometimes mistakenly think you need something really enormous. A 6 or an 8-inch telescope, a simple Dobsonian, can be a lifetime instrument.
right.
An 8-inch Dobsonian can show you 40,000 different interesting things in the sky, more than you'd have a lifetime of exploration. A 100-millimeter refractor like this, you can see tens of thousands of surface features on the moon, just the moon. So any telescope can be a lifetime instrument. But when it comes to our magnification, we have to remember telescopes gather light, eyepieces magnify the image, but the atmosphere ultimately puts the upper limit on what we can do, both in terms of light pollution, clarity, turbulence, and the higher power eyepiece you get, the rarer are the circumstances when the sky will be nice enough to allow you to use it.
True.
The other last thing I'll bring up about magnification, Scott, the telescope magnifies everything. It magnifies every wiggle of the mount.
Yes, it
At
does.
200
All the
power,
turbulence, all the everything.
turbulence gets magnified, sky glow problems get magnified, if there's a lack of clarity in the sky, that's magnified. At 200 power, and you know this, with your hand, we tell people focus and let go, and they want to hold it like it's a motorcycle.
Right.
And you reach out, and when you're holding this handle, this focuser knob at 200 power,
Yeah.
you can see your heartbeat in the stars.
Yes.
Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. The other thing, when we magnify, the field that we get gets progressively smaller. And it's when you're talking about starting out with an eyepiece, I tell people, okay, start out with the biggest, lowest power eyepiece you have, find your object, and then gradually switch up to the smaller, higher power eyepiece. Well, why? Why can't I just start at 200 power? It's like trying to read a newspaper through a McDonald's straw. Can you do it? I suppose you can. We get this issue too with binoculars. Every once in a while, I get an email. I saw this on, a Facebook ad or on a Google ad, and it says amazing miracle zoom binocular from 50 to 300 power. You don't need a telescope. And I said, oh, are you supposed to hand hold that thing? Does it have a mount for a tripod? Well, what's a mount? I'm like, okay, you can't hold anything at 50 power.
Plus, many of those binoculars, they have a very small aperture.
Oh,
Because they're portable, right? They fit in your hand.
Yeah. Zoom limits the light. It has a lot of glass in it. Cheap zooms are usually very narrow field.
Right.
They waste a lot of light. The cone of light, what we call the exopupil coming out to your eye, is tiny, a
Yes.
millimeter or less in size. And generally speaking, you can't hand hold anything more than about 12 pounds. There are techniques, and you can brace your arms against your torso and all of that. And I've used I have a nice pair of 15 by 70 binoculars. I've used them handheld, but I'm tucking my arms in, and people are like, why are you look like a Tyrannosaurus, why are you doing that? Well, you have to brace yourself because it's magnifying my hand trim 15 times.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see Jupiter and the moons with that? I'm like, yeah, try it. It's all wiggly. I'm like, no, the binoculars are fine. You're wiggly. Well, I'm not. Well, the telescope magnifies, any binocular telescope magnifies the vibration. That's why as we get to larger telescopes, we're very concerned with a rock-solid telescope mount.
Mm-hmm.
We were discussing this just before the show.
Sure.
You need a mount that's rock-solid. And the heavier your telescope is, the longer beefy you need the mount to be, to the point where we're talking, huge concrete reinforced with steel columns that would literally hold up the corner of a decent sized office building, and you're putting 150 pounds of telescope on top of it. But it needs to be that solid because uh, vibration ruins a magnified view. The telescope also, when we're talking magnification, magnifies the motion of the Earth.
Hmm.
And when we get past about 50 to 75 power, depends on how experienced you are. If you're tracking by hand, if you've got, let's say, a Dobsonian, which is a simple altitude azimuth mount, and you're tracking by hand at more than about 50 power, it's difficult. And people have noticed, oh, I'm looking at the telescope and here's Saturn and it's drifting and it goes out of the field of view. So the more magnification, the smaller the field, and the more precise movements we need to track with. So many people go to a motorized mount, or I have an old-fashioned mount that just has a slow motion knob. You line it up, one knob tracks the sky, and it works very well. But at 100 power, every few seconds you're adjusting that knob. And that's why people who are interested in high power planetary and lunar views want to go with a tracking mount, not just people who are looking at deep sky things where they want to put a camera and take a 10-minute exposure. So magnification really is a very multifaceted subject, and depends on many factors, only some of which are in our control. And when you have a telescope and people say, oh, I looked through it and everything was swimming, well, okay, try again another night. Don't be impatient, don't give up. And people don't realize
Or
it.
just wait. Just wait.
Just wait, yeah. Sometimes,
Couple
generally
hours.
as it gets later, wind dies down, the sky becomes more calm. At sunset, when the sun is going down and all of a sudden you're no longer adding energy to the atmosphere, it's very turbulent. And for the first hour or so after sunset, when buildings and the ground are cooling off, the sky can be very turbulent. A couple hours after sunset, and this time of year, that means starting your observing around 11 o'clock at night. But in the winter, we get early sunsets. And of course, you can see the skies earlier if you're just a refusenik and don't move your clocks forward an hour in the springtime. You'll say, oh, sunset at 7 o'clock instead of 8. But seriously, I'm hoping that all of our viewers, when they go out, they'll go ahead and take the next clear night. The moon is a wonderful target. And just see how far you can push your telescope. How far can you get to where you honestly aren't getting any more detail? Because every instrument is individual. How it works with a particular kind of eyepieces are different. And so if you belong to an astronomy club, and someone has this, really cool eyepiece, oh, what's that? That's an 82 degree, 18 millimeter. Can I try that? And telescope astronomy clubs are great, and people are always willing to let you have a go with their kit. Sure, you bring your scope, let's give it a go. And you can try before you buy if you have a friendly astronomy club nearby. But I'm hoping this is helping a lot of people who, there's been so many people who have bought new telescopes during the pandemic. I know you've mentioned that your business has been exploding, and everybody else.
As well as the whole industry. Yep.
The whole industry. And people are saying, why does it take me 4 months to get a telescope? Well, because hundreds of thousands of other people want one just like and it's kind of like, take my money, I want my telescope. And I'm hoping that these new observers, I want you to continue to be amazed. I want you to continue to enjoy your telescope. Over the summer, we're going to talk about more things to do with your telescope. Because school's not in session, so the school type activities, we're going to transition over the summer into more telescope type activities. Next week, Scott, we're going to talk about lunar exploration with your telescope. What can you see? And just, oh, I see the moon. Oh, it's got craters. There's a lot more to explore than that.
That's true.
And we're going to talk about that next week on the How Do You Know show. So I hope we'll see you all there. I encourage everybody, if you haven't done so, please go ahead and download a copy of astronomy for educators. It's really astronomy for everyone. 36 hands-on activities that are fun for parents and kids and outreach people to do together. Look me up, Daniel Barth, Astronomy for Educators, on any search engine. You'll find it. Scott has a link on the
Yep.
explorescientific.com/how do you know. And we've got all the episodes now on YouTube. So if you haven't caught all our episodes, please go ahead and do so. If you're an outreach person or a teacher, drop me a line at astronomyforeducators@gmail.com. I have curriculum and handouts for all of these. Scott puts them up on his website as well. And anybody has questions about telescopes, about teaching astronomy, about outreach, drop me an email, and I'm thrilled to hear from you all. And we'll look forward to seeing you next Monday on How Do You Know?
Great. All right, thank you very much, Daniel, and we will be back, of course, next Monday with the 8th episode of How Do You Know? Take care.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Okay, so that was it. Lots of great questions from the audience about eyepieces and visual observing and binocular observing and stuff. So that was really cool. I have also made a video that I've run a couple of times on our program on how to choose and use eyepieces. But you can find that on YouTube. You can find it on our Facebook pages as well. If you'd like, I can play it for you sometime. But I go through all of the formulas and everything on how to choose and use eyepieces. And it works for any brand, any type of eyepieces as well. Once we're out of this, once we're out now getting back together at star parties, a really great reason to go to a star party, if you're a visual observer, is the ability to try and test different eyepieces on your telescope. And so a lot of people in an astronomy club are willing to share. When Explore Scientific goes out, we bring all of our eyepieces and we let people check them out because there's just no better way to go than trying it. There is no exact formula for everybody because that combination of your eye, the eyepiece optics, your telescope optics, and the conditions for the night are all very, very individual. So, I know people with serious, serious visual observers, and they have 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or even more eyepieces in their collection. And they will just kind of hunt and peck until they get the exact best right view for right then. And this is really important if you're trying to recover a comet or you're trying to make some very, very critical observation of a planet. So these are, there's no, I wouldn't say there's a magic formula. I will tell you that the formulas get you very, very close and will take you more than 80%, maybe like 90% there. But those tiny little differences to a beginner are almost meaningless, but to an advanced astronomer, advanced observer, that 0.5% better or 0.3% better sometimes makes all the difference in the world. So thanks for watching today. Tomorrow we will have more programming, including the 43rd Global Star Party, which will start at 8 p.m. So until that time, you guys have a great night. Wishing you all clear skies. And I have a little video, a feature from NASA that I'll show you as well if you continue to watch. Until that time, take care, and we'll talk to you later.
had my own sewing business.
I was helping in a folkloric festival in Argentina, so I was running the horses.
I was also a bartender at a music festival.
My name is Paula Kane. I am a thermal blanket technician.
I'm Geronimo Villanueva. I'm a planetary scientist.
My name is Joy Eun, and I'm a video producer at NASA.
I am from Capitol Heights, Maryland.
I was born in Mendoza, Argentina.
I'm from Devon, which is on the southwest coast of the UK.
So as a fashion design major, ended up designing clothes for satellites, basically.
Electrical engineering actually was my undergrad. And then my master's was in telecommunications. Then I went to Germany, this is where I did my PhD, and then it became astrophysics.
I did my undergrad in biology, which I loved, but I also love many other areas in science too. So I decided to do a science communication course for my master's.
Well, I ended up working here at NASA. It sort of happened by mistake. I used to always check the Washington Post ads for jobs, and they had ones that, are you a Star Trek fan? Do you think about space? And it said, come work here at NASA as a thermal blanket technician. Had no idea what it was, so I called, came in for the interview, and I got the job.
So when I moved to Germany and started doing my PhD, I discovered the European Space Agency, the German Space Agency, and started working in connection with NASA. So when I finished my PhD, this is when they offered me a fellowship to come here to NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. It was supposed to be for 2 years, and I've been here for 15.
When I first started working at NASA, I started out as the Earth Science Multimedia Fellow. So I was on the Earth Science News team covering breaking news.
When I thought of NASA, I thought of space, I thought of futuristic things, I thought of the Jetsons.
Even if you hear NASA, you think about these genius people.
As a kid, I never thought I could work for NASA.
When I got offered to do the fellowship here, I actually was scared to come here because when I said, oh my God, am I actually qualified to be working at NASA?
I mean, what it means to me now being a NASA employee is that the sky's the limit.
And once you arrive here and you realize that it's just people that have passion for space. That's the main thing that defines a NASA scientist.
To work at NASA, I think you have to be really curious about the world.
You just have to find your niche and where you can fit in here, because you can fit in here.
If you have that passion for space, don't let anybody tell you what are your limits.
There is definitely a job for you. There are so many jobs here.
The fact that I am here doing it, I'm getting to touch things that are going into space. Working here now, I'm doing things that people will never even dream of. And I'm a fashion designer. So don't let your preconceptions of what people think stop you.
Hello everybody, this is Scott Roberts from Explore Scientific, and today I want to talk about the world famous Galileo Telescope Kit. This is a kit that you assemble by yourself. You'll learn how optics work by assembling the objective lens and also the eyepiece. And there's two different eyepieces that are in this. A 25 power, 20 millimeter eyepiece, but it also comes with this very clever little device here that works both as a Barley lens that will double the magnification of this eyepiece, making it 50 power, or it can be used also as a Galilean eyepiece, which gives 17 power to the telescope. This is what Galileo virtually saw through his own telescope, so you can have that same experience that Galileo had looking at the moon, looking at Saturn's rings, looking at Jupiter. It is a telescope that was designed for the International Year of Astronomy in 2009, and it's a fantastic kit, both for child and adult, to learn how a telescope works. And so if you get the telescope like this, you can either have it on a stand like this, you can hand hold it like a pirate's glass, or on the bottom here we have a threaded hole here that you can put it on a camera tripod. Very versatile, very rugged, and a lot of fun, all from Explore Scientific.